I mean, I feel like I have done this many, many times in my life where I've had to let something old die inside of me to go even further on my own path, my own authentic path. So one example is around the age of 30. So prior to becoming a therapist, all my experience was working in the nonprofit world because I very much believe in equality and justice for all. So I was really called to work with the most marginalized, disenfranchised populations. And in doing that, I was grossly underpaid. I felt very overwhelmed. I carried a lot of vicarious trauma, meaning that I absorbed other people's pain. And I became so burnt out and exhausted that I completely left the path. I said, I don't want to be a therapist anymore. And that was after going to grad school and working on getting licensed to be a psychotherapist. There was a point where I was actually out in Maui at my best friend's wedding, childhood best friend, and I'm sitting on a beach by myself at night. And I am looking up at the stars and I just hear this voice that sounds like my own voice, but I knew it was something larger. And it just told me, when you go back, quit your job. And I loved my coworkers and my students, but I was working within a really broken system and I was miserable. I remember there's one point during that job where I was at home in Mountain View with my family and I'm packing all my things and getting ready to go back to San Francisco. And I just start bawling at the kitchen table, like, please don't make me go back. I can't do this. So it was getting that message out on that beach. I came back to San Francisco. I gave 2 months notice because I wanted to respectfully finish out the semester. And then Abby, I had nothing else lined up. I had a couple months of savings. I mean, I do have family support, so I knew I wasn't completely out on my own, but I literally was like, what the fuck am I gonna do? So I quit that job and I had 2 weeks of complete liberation, and then the panic set in. I couldn't sleep at night. I was an anxious mess. Well, I started walking. So I lived in Oakland at the time. I still do. And I live by Lake Merritt. So I would walk the lake and I recognized an old friend from college also walking the lake. And she was also unemployed at the time, also breaking away from a job that made her sick. And we bonded and we started walking the lake a couple times. And then I was really determined at that time. I didn't want to go back on antidepressants. I didn't want to go back on medication. So I started doing research around other alternatives to help relax and ground. And I discovered something called Reiki. And I found a low-fee clinic not too far from here. And they offered Reiki every Tuesday night for free. And I went and I met this beautiful teacher named Heather. And so I started seeing her one-on-one, and she charged me such a low fee, bless her. She was so generous. And in one session, the entire room filled up with 100 ladybugs. And she told me that in the 3 years that she had worked there, that had actually never happened before. So then I looked online and she looked online and I read through a couple of books that ladybugs means wish fulfillment. And so that day after that ladybug session, I go home and I start cleaning out my junk drawer. I have one drawer that's like a hot mess. It just is so disorganized. I've been like that since I was a kid. And I look through this drawer and I find a $1,000 security deposit rent check that I had never cashed. And I needed that money. That became rent for 1 more month. And then I found my next job after that 1 month.
What was that next next job?
I was a temporary career counselor.
Oh.
So still a counselor, but not a therapist.
Mhm.
And actually what I found in that job is I hated it. There was no human connection. I was in front of an Excel spreadsheet all day. And actually it was from there that I decided to join a 1-year therapy program where that helped me launch my private practice. So I returned, but I didn't go back to the nonprofit world. I knew that I actually had to do it my own way.
So the inner